So this week's program features two pieces by two composers that the São Paulo Symphony Orchestra pays homage to during this season, Carl Nielsen and Toru Takemitsu. By the way, I will also conduct a piece by Takemitsu's next June 21st with the São Paulo Chamber Orchestra. But for you, what's the importance of these two composers to classical music?
Well, both have a very, very interesting voice. I mean, Nielsen, as a sort of a Danish national kind of, he's sort of the big composer from Denmark, and every country, especially in that part of the world, has their clear, big sort of nationalistic voice. And Sibelius for Finland, for example. I mean, you can't go to Finland without hearing Sibelius or hearing the name, and everybody knows. And same thing with Carl Nielsen. Carl Nielsen wrote so much work, and it's unfortunate that so much of it is neglected. A lot of orchestras don't play a lot of his music, except maybe the Inextinguishable Symphony No. 4, and that's about it. But he's written so much, and this concerto is definitely one of those pieces, along with the flute concerto as well. That's very, very popular. So I mean, for me, it's a different voice. It's a very interesting voice. It's a unique voice, and the same goes for Takemitsu. Takemitsu writes these pieces that are just incredibly difficult, but incredibly beautiful in their colors and their soundscape. I mean, it's like seeing this incredible impressionist modern painting. Even maybe more so than Debussy. I mean, just a whole different kind of style of writing. And he almost doesn't care how difficult it is, because it's rhythmically challenging, but he requires so much rubato, so much musicality, so much of the orchestra having to kind of find their way through all of those rhythmical things. For me, they're just so different, unique, but genius voices that they can't be neglected.
Okay. And what could you tell us about the three pieces that will be played on these concerts?
Well, the Eighth Symphony, of course, is a very interesting symphony, of course, where it is sort of on the map, because you have number 7 right before it, which is so exuberant and wonderful in its own way, and then the 9th that came right after it, which is, I think everybody knows, is a milestone in classical music. I mean, everybody assumes it and hears about it, but when you actually study it and you see the kinds of things that he does in the 9th, and to have this tiny little piece in between, he's done that in several, there's number 4, which comes between, of course, 3 and 5, and those two monumental things. It's almost as if he takes a break and just writes something interesting. I mean, number 8 is wonderful in that it's simple. It has a lot of interesting virtuosity for the orchestra. That's, for the time, of course. I mean, it's not difficult now, but at the time, it's interesting virtuosity. He makes fun of the metronome that sort of, ran him crazy throughout his life in the second movement, having the winds play this sort of metronomic, as if it's the click of the metronome, and this very, very interesting duet, or I should say trio, between the two horns and the clarinet in the third movement, as well as the cellos. I mean, he really does a lot of very inventive things, yet seemingly very, very simple. I think that's what's so interesting about that piece. And of course, these two pieces, the Nielsen and the Takemitsu Green, is such like I was mentioning before, this incredible soundscape of colors. I mean, I've played his, one piece that I remember playing is Rocking Mirror Daybreak for 2 violins. Violin is my instrument. And I remember even that piece, between 2 voices, 2 of the same voices, he does all these really incredible sonorities and rhythmical units that end up being motives, and all of these things that I found very fascinating. But to see him do it for a full orchestra is really kind of magnificent. It's almost too bad that it's only 6 minutes long. It's just a wonderful thing. And then the Clarinet Concerto by Carl Nielsen is a staple. It's a really, really interesting piece. It's in one movement. It's like a fantasy, basically. It's like sort of 15-minute, this long, through-composed fantasy. I mean, it is in three distinct sections, but they kind of bleed into each other, and you kind of don't know when one movement starts and one movement ends. What's interesting about the piece is it's for string orchestra and the clarinet solo, of course, but it's two bassoons, two horns, and snare drum, of all things. And so it's this, there's so many of these instances where the snare drum interjects and plays with and is a duo with the clarinet, sometimes is fighting against the clarinet, sometimes is fighting against the orchestra. That's something I haven't seen before in any other piece, you know, somehow how he sort of incorporates that sonority into the piece. So they're really three very, very different pieces, very distinct pieces, but I think makes for a really, really nice concert.